long before the Healing Church was founded, before Bergenworth discovered the Old Blood, and long before the streets of Yharnam were overrun by beasts, there was another civilization buried deep beneath the earth. The Thumerians were a race that resided deep beneath the earth. Their civilization was entirely built on sprawling networks known as Chalice Dungeons. In-game, Chalice descriptions identify the Thumerians as a race of superhuman beings who discovered what the lore refers to as the Eldritch Truth. Whatever they found in the dark depths of the earth became the catalyst for everything that followed. The Thumerians came into direct contact with cosmic entities known as the Great Ones. The Great Ones are not regular beasts or animals you would come across. They are extraterrestrial cosmic entities that exist on transcendental planes of thought. To exist on a transcendental plane means that these beings have elevated their consciousness far beyond the limits of the physical world. They exist outside the dimensions humans can perceive or comprehend, operating on a level of existence that is fundamentally alien to us. This concept of existence of the Great Ones is only visible after a being has gained enough insight. Insight represents how much of the hidden cosmic reality a mind can actually see. The human brain naturally blocks out these horrors to protect itself from madness. But as a person gains insight, this mental shield breaks down. The world reveals its true terrifying form. A clear example of this involves the amygdala. An ordinary person looks at the city's towering architecture and sees empty space. A person with enough insight looks at the exact same buildings and sees massive, multi-limbed Great Ones clinging to the walls, watching from above. The creatures were always there. The observer just finally gained the eyes to see them. Gaining this knowledge is extremely dangerous. The mortal mind cannot handle the Eldritch Truth. Seeing too much causes rapid insanity, which the game calls frenzy. The sheer weight of this cosmic knowledge literally causes the brain to hemorrhage. The Thumerians somehow survived this exposure. They soon integrated these beings into their culture. Spending time near the Great Ones altered their anatomies, giving them extreme height, long lives, and, as described in-game, superhuman strength to navigate the dark. But the Thumerians were not the only residents of this underground metropolis. Deeper into the earth, another civilization flourished called Loren. Loren's history serves as a dark warning for the rest of the world. According to the ailing Loren Chalice, this tragic land was eventually devoured by the sands after being entirely consumed by a horrific disease known as the Scourge of the Beast. Today, the surviving ruins are buried and filled with the remains of monsters. The exact cause of this disaster remains a mystery, but the lower Loren Chalice mentions that trace remains of medical procedures can still be found within the ruins. It is heavily implied that the people of Loren tried to cure the beast plague, or perhaps attempted to harness the power of the Great Ones, which only accelerated their downfall. A common theory suggests they deliberately experimented on cosmic remnants, bringing down a curse. While this remains unconfirmed speculation, the end result is absolute. Loren fell, leaving behind only dead ruins that greatly foreshadows what would eventually happen to humanity on the surface. At the peak of their civilization, the Thumerians were ruled by a monarchy. They traditionally elected a female leader to serve as both their ruler and a physical vessel for the Great Ones. The most significant of these leaders was Queen Yharnam. Her spirit still wanders the deepest chalice dungeons, appearing in a white dress that is heavily saturated with blood around the stomach. Her historical importance comes directly from her role as a mother. She was chosen to bear a child for the Great One named Odin. The formless Odin Carol rune provides a crucial detail about the entity. The Great One Odin lacked form, exists only in voice, and is symbolized by this rune. Odin is an anomaly among cosmic beings. He possesses no physical body and exists entirely as a voice. Despite lacking a physical form, he successfully fathered a child with Queen Yharnam. That child was named Mergo. The game provides no direct explanation for what happened during the pregnancy, but it leaves a highly disturbing clue at the very bottom of the crypts. When you defeat Queen Yharnam in the final layer of the Ahil Chalice dungeon, she drops a calcified object called the Yharnam stone. The item description simply calls it a secret heirloom left by Yharnam, Pthumerian queen. The visual design of the stone, paired with the heavy blood stains on the queen's abdomen, points to a horrifying theory. In the real world, an abdominal pregnancy can cause a fetus to die outside the uterus. If the mother's body cannot absorb the dead tissue, it calcifies into a stone baby to protect her from a lethal infection. The theory suggests Queen Yharnam suffered this exact fate. Mergo's physical body died before birth, and the Yharnam stone represents the petrified remains of the infant, fused with the placenta. The game never explicitly confirms this theory, but it kind of matches the visual evidence. What the game does confirm is an absolute fact. Through the description, the third umbilical cord states, "Every Great One loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate." The exact reason for this remains a mystery. It might be their limitations resulting from the extreme evolution. We may never know. Regardless of the cause, it is an undeniable fact. Great Ones lose their children, and Mergo was one of them. With their children lost and the physical world tainted by the plagues of Lauren, the majority of the Great Ones ascended to higher planes. But they did not take everything with them. Scattered throughout the dark recesses of the ancient labyrinth were creatures known as kin. These were lesser cosmic beings, closely related to the Great Ones, but entirely bound to the physical plane. The most significant of these remaining entities was Ebritas, who was left behind. Why she was abandoned, or why she lacked the ability to ascend alongside her brethren, is never explained. As centuries passed, the Pthumerian civilization inevitably crumbled. Their grand halls decayed into forgotten tombs. A portion of the surviving Pthumerians eventually migrated to the surface, laying the earliest foundations for a settlement that would one day become the city of Yharnam. Centuries later, an institute of learning was established in the secluded forest just outside the limits of Yharnam. This was Byrgenwerth College. Founded and led by a man named Master Willem, the college was dedicated to pushing the limits of human knowledge and potential. Willem gathered a group of brilliant scholars, and his inner circle included prominent students such as Lawrence, Mikolash, and Carol. Together, these scholars conducted extensive research into history and the arcane, which eventually led them to uncover the entrance to the ancient Chalice dungeons. The scholars began mounting expeditions deep into the tombs. However, the labyrinth was far too dangerous for ordinary academics. The descendants of the Pthumerians, mutated by centuries of proximity to the arcane and possessing superhuman strength, still aggressively guarded the ruins. Deep within the labyrinth, the scholars found something that would alter the course of human history. They discovered a holy medium. While the English translation of the game leaves the exact nature of this medium slightly ambiguous, the original Japanese text provides absolute clarity. The Japanese description of the Augur of Ebritas explicitly states that the Byrgenwerth scholars stumbled upon the left-behind Great One herself. Encountering a living cosmic entity catalyzed Byrgenwerth's pursuit of the arcane. The scholars immediately began conducting rigorous research on Ebritas, resulting in two monumental discoveries. The first discovery pertained to the anatomy of the Great Ones. Examining the physical form of Ebritas, specifically her split face, which appears to expose a brain clustered with eyes, led Master Willem to a realization. Willem concluded that humanity was operating on the basest of planes. To evolve and match the greatness of these cosmic beings, mankind needed to elevate its thoughts. He believed the only way to achieve this was to literally and metaphorically line the brain with eyes, focusing entirely on accumulating insight. The second discovery was physical. The scholars extracted the blood of Ebritas, which they dubbed the Old Blood. They quickly realized that the blood of a Great One possessed miraculous healing properties capable of curing any disease or wound. The Old Blood made Byrgenwerth's dream of human evolution feel like an immediate reality. However, this discovery also brought a terrible risk. Among Willem's inner circle was an academic named Carol. Endowed with an extreme degree of insight, Carol possessed the extraordinary ability to comprehend the alien whispers of the Great Ones. Rather than succumbing to madness, Carol etched these cosmic sounds into visual symbols. This process is detained in the description of the Rune Workshop tool, which notes that Carol transcribed the inhuman utterings of the Great Ones into what are now known as Carol runes. These runes offered profound knowledge, but they also highlighted a dire warning regarding the Old Blood. The Clawmark Carol rune explicitly describes beasthood as a dark instinct deep within. This indicates that the monstrous traits were a dormant state already residing within mankind. The Old Blood merely acted as a catalyst, stripping away human restraint and forcing the beastly nature to finally take hold. Master Willem recognized this inherent danger. He liked Carol's work because it offered a way to harness cosmic power safely. The Rune Workshop tool confirms this philosophy, stating that Provost Willem would have been proud of Carol's runes, as they do not rely upon blood in any measure. For Willem, the only secure route to human ascension was through the slow pursuit of insight, which is only obtained by lining the brain with the eyes, rather than corrupting the body with alien blood. However, his most ambitious student, Lawrence, viewed Willem's approach as overly cautious. Lawrence was convinced that the miraculous properties of the Old Blood were the definitive key to forcing humanity into its next evolutionary stage. We witnessed this ideological clash firsthand in the memory triggered by examining Lawrence's skull in the Grand Cathedral. In this vision, Willem implores his students to fear the Old Blood, but Lawrence refuses to be held back by his master's restraint. The uncompromising division over the method of human elevation, which is insight versus blood, fractured the foundation of Byrgenwerth. It initiated a division in the ideologies of Byrgenwerth that would eventually bring the entire downfall of Yharnam. Following his departure from Byrgenwerth, Lawrence traveled to the neighboring region and founded the Healing Church. Utilizing the blood extracted from Abritas, the newly formed church offered this miraculous fluid directly to the sick and desperate. Ailments were cured immediately, and this unprecedented medical success transformed Yharnam into a sprawling, wealthy empire characterized by towering Gothic cathedrals. Blood administration became a normalized, daily practice across the city. The fluid possessed an intoxicating, euphoric quality that proved far more addictive than the strongest alcohol, causing reliant citizens to line the cobblestone streets outside the church clinics every single morning. The Healing Church established an absolute monopoly over the supply, making them the supreme political and social authority in Yharnam. But masked entirely by this overwhelming success, the Old Blood, as mentioned earlier, had a distinct property. It acted as a catalyst to the bestial instinct of mankind to hijack their bodies and take a hold of them. As the years dragged on, the blood began to alter human anatomy at the cellular level. Thick patches of coarse grey hair erupted across the pale skin of the citizens. Human jaws violently extended outward into elongated snouts, and flat teeth snapped and sharpened into jagged fangs. Skeletons stretched and broke into terrifying hunched shapes. Stripped of human reasoning and driven purely by a desperate hunger for raw meat and fresh blood, these mutated citizens became horrifying beasts that stalked the dark alleyways during the night. The Healing Church recognized the spread of this beastly scourge, but chose to keep it completely secret to maintain their absolute power. Otherwise, if the general population get to know the effects of the Old Blood, they would absolutely panic, which will result in a huge protest against the church. So they decided that the best approach would be to keep it a secret and deal with it in secrecy. They realized that standard city guards equipped with heavy iron armor and thick metal shields were dying in the streets because their equipment proved useless against the immense physical strength and terrifying speed of the beasts. A fundamental shift in combat strategy was absolutely necessary. A quiet observer and veteran of the tomb excavations named Gehrman stepped forward, discarding heavy metal plating entirely in favor of a long leather coat, tall boots, and light cloth garments. Gehrman designed a revolutionary method of combat focused on extreme agility and relentless aggression. He dedicated his training to mastering sudden evasions, developing an advanced movement technique known as quickening. This allowed him to momentarily vanish into a cloud of grey mist and instantly reappear behind a lunging monster before it could track his new position. To complement this incredibly fluid style, Gehrman sought a specific, dense paramagnetic mineral called siderite that had fallen directly from the sky in the form of a heavy meteorite. Forging this metal meticulously within a hidden workshop perched on a high cliff overlooking the cathedral ward, he shaped the metal into a heavy curved blade attached to a long wooden pole via a complex mechanical hinge. The weapon also functioned as a swift sword for close quarters engagements, but could be forcefully expanded outward in a fraction of a second to transform into a massive two-handed scythe. Never dulling despite constantly shearing through thick hide and dense bone, the burial blade became the absolute triumph of engineering that established the base design for all the future trick weapons to come. Gehrman also heavily modified a standard short-barrel firearm into a devastating blunderbuss. The weapon was designed to fire a massive spread of sharp lead shot to completely shatter an attacking beast's forward momentum. Firing the heavy weapon at point-blank range directly into the face of a lunging creature created a momentary opening, allowing the agile hunter to step inward and plunge his bare hands or sharp blade directly into the chest cavity to inflict catastrophic internal damage. Gehrman was also recruiting sane apprentices from the remaining population to learn these methods, as there would be no other way that he could have dealt with all these creatures by himself. The hidden workshop behind the cathedral ward was a base for these secret associations of hunters. They operated strictly under the cover of darkness, wearing dark cloth to mask the accumulating bloodstains, while they slaughtered the infected citizens. This kept the terrifying truth of the scourge hidden from the general public. Drawn by the rumors of this hidden crusade, a tall noblewoman named Maria abandoned her ancestral home in the isolated snow-covered fortress of Canehurst Castle. She completely rejected her family's dark practices of manipulating corrupted blood to artificially enhance their physical strength. Seeking out Gehrman at his cliffside workshop, the pale-skinned, blonde-haired noble asked to join the grueling nightly hunts. She quickly proved herself to be an exceptionally talented warrior who mastered the elusive art of quickening with flawless precision. Refusing to wield the brutal, serrated mechanical cleavers favored by her peers, she commissioned a completely unique, hingeless weapon named the Rakyo. She relied entirely on her immense physical dexterity to wield the interlocking twin-blade sword with swift, lethal strikes rather than destructive brute force. Spending countless time with Maria, the aging mentor developed a sense of admiration for his most talented student that slowly and tragically warped into a deeply unrequited romantic obsession. Remaining completely unaware of this, Maria viewed the first hunter as a deeply respected elder and mentor, dedicating her entire existence to protecting the innocent citizens of Yharnam as they fought shoulder to shoulder through the blood-soaked streets night after night. Eventually, the infection grew too rampant to hide. The upper echelons of the healing church sealed the heavy iron gates to the cathedral ward, locking themselves away. They left the lower districts to rot, but devised a method to manage the outbreak from the shadows by forming their own official church hunters. These hunters were divided by the color of their garments. The hunters in white were researchers and medical practitioners who specialized in environmental blood administration, continuing to steady the old blood's effects. The hunters in black served a different purpose, Their role was extermination, tasked with violently purging Yharnam of the beastly scourge. The Black Church Hunters viewed beasthood as a cancer. Wearing surgical white gloves to separate themselves from the filth of their work, they operated with absolute ruthlessness. They actively hunted for the earliest signs of the sickness, executing citizens immediately if they harbored the dormant beast within. Their dark attire became synonymous with death, and the citizens of Yharnam lived in terror of these men. Among these ranks was a foreigner who came to Yharnam bearing the title of Father. His name was Gascoigne. The Healing Church utilized no such rank, marking him clearly as an outsider. His motivations for traveling to the cursed city remains unclear, but Gascoigne was an exceptionally capable killer. He fought with a heavy hunter axe, dragging the blade across the cobblestones to spark and ignite, and wielded a custom scattershot firearm that shattered bones. The church quickly integrated him into their ranks as a black hunter. Gascoigne was partnered with an older veteran hunter named Henrik, who wore a distinct, heavy yellow garb. They formed a fierce and highly effective duo against the beasts. Through his partnership, Henrik survived countless hunts, his life extending far beyond normal human limits. This tragically long life was likely a direct result of Gascoigne securing Henrik access to the church's finest, most potent blood. The old blood granted longevity, but it extracted a heavy toll on the mind. Together, the foreign father and the yellow-garbed veteran cleared the streets. During this time in Yharnam, Gascoigne managed to establish a life outside the walls of the Healing Church. He married a woman named Viola, recognizable by her blonde hair and a large, bright red jeweled brooch she wore on her chest. They settled in a tall brick house in central Yharnam and had 2 young daughters. The existence of a family grounded Gascoigne, and as his children grew, the priority of the hunt diminished, prompting him to officially leave the ranks of the Healing Church to remain with his family. Escaping the hunt entirely was an impossibility for any resident of Yharnam. When the sun dipped below the horizon and the scourge flared, the ordinary men of the city did not cower. They barricaded their homes, burned pungent incense at their windows to mask the scent of human flesh, and formed armed mobs. Wielding pitchforks, torches, and jagged cleavers, they patrolled the cobblestones to slaughter anything that showed signs of sickness. Gascoigne routinely fought alongside these desperate vigilantes. He stubbornly continued to wear his tattered black church coat, a highly dangerous decision given the local populace had grown to violently despise the Healing Church ministers who had sealed the gates and abandoned them. The violence and the intoxicating metallic stench of blood slowly eroded Gascoigne's mind. The dormant beast within him began to stir with every creature he cut down. To anchor his fading sanity, Viola relied on a small mechanical music box. It played a familiar melody that they shared as a family. Whenever Gascoigne returned from a night of slaughter, lost in the hazy delirium of the bloodlust, Viola would play the chime. The song forced his mind to remember his wife, his daughters, and his fading humanity, successfully pulling him back from his instincts of becoming a beast. But the old blood spares no one. During a night of unending violence, Gascoigne's mind finally snapped. The sheer volume of spilled blood saturating the city overwhelmed his senses. When Viola ventured out to find him in the tomb of Odin, she forgot the music box. Feral and completely consumed by the scourge, Gascoigne struck down his own wife. By the time a foreign hunter executed the mutated father, the damage was irreversible. Gascoigne's younger daughter was later devoured by a mutated boar in the city sewers while seeking a safe haven, and her older sister threw herself off a stone embankment in a fit of grief upon finding her bloodied ribbon. The entire bloodline of a devoted father was erased in a single night, proving that the scourge corrupts every facet of human life. The Healing Church knew their hunters would eventually break, To counter this internal threat, they established another branch of hunters who would eventually hunt the hunters themselves, who have succumbed to the beastly scourge. Eileen was among these new branch of hunter, an elderly outsider from the distant hinterlands. She wore a heavy cloak of black feathers and a beaked mask stuffed with strong incense to drown out the maddening scent of blood. Eileen carried the miserable burden of executing men she once fought alongside, such as Gascoigne's former partner, Henrik, who lost his mind upon discovering his ruined family. A tragedy eventually scaled from individual families to entire districts. Old Yharnam was a place that was struck with a lethal illness, which the locals termed as the Ashen Blood. It was a rapid plague that drained the vitality of the townspeople. Traditionally, doctors possessed no cure, offering only small, chalky white antidote pills that merely delayed the inevitable. At the height of this despair, the healing church arrived in the valley, presenting blood ministration as a miraculous cure for the Ashen Blood plague. With the citizens of Old Yharnam desperate and dying, the church offered them exactly what they needed, which was salvation. A transfusion provided by the healing church worked. The afflicted were cured, the dying were pulled from the brink, and the people of Old Yharnam placed their faith in the church that had saved them. But the church's intervention was not simply an act of charity. By bringing its blood ministration to the suffering citizens, it gained their trust, devotion, and authority. The people needed a cure, and the healing church had the means to provide it. In saving Old Yharnam from the Ashen Blood plague, the church effectively secured its influence over the city and eventually over Yharnam as a whole. While the fluid erased the poison, it planted the dormant seed of the scourge deep within their veins. Because the valley was the primary testing ground, its people were heavily saturated with the old blood. When the unnatural blood moon eventually descended over the city and triggered their transformation, the beastly nature erupted violently within thousands of citizens simultaneously. Old Yharnam was completely overrun. The sheer volume of the monsters rendered the quiet and precise hunting techniques of Gehrman's workshop completely useless. A desperate mandate was issued. Old Yharnam must be permanently quarantined and physically destroyed. The church deployed the powder kegs, a radical faction of hunters who completely rejected subtle executions in favor of heavy cannons, explosive stake drivers, and raw fire. The powder kegs made their way down to the depths of Old Yharnam, where they massacred the entire townfolks. After this, they securely sealed the massive iron gates from the outside, trapping the healthy, the sick, and the fully mutated together. They marched into the valley and set the entire city ablaze. Thick black smoke choked the air as wooden homes and towering churches caught fire. Men, women, children, and feral beasts were all burned alive. Among the ranks of the powder kegs stood an elite hunter named Jura. Historical records describe him as uncommonly kind, standing amidst the charred corpses of the citizens he had sworn to protect. To him, these were not just beasts, they were still people who had been transformed by blood. He could no longer accept the idea that every infected citizen had to be hunted down and killed. So Jira eventually turned against the very hunters he once fought alongside. He settled in the ruins of Old Yharnam and dedicated himself to protecting its beasts, believing they were victims rather than monsters. From that point on, Jira would attack any hunter who entered the city, trying to prevent them from repeating the slaughter he had witnessed. As the old blood continued to rot the city from the inside out, the quiet, precise methods of Gehrman's hidden workshop became entirely obsolete. Yharnam was falling, so were its residents. The founders of the Healing Church realized they needed a far more permanent, otherworldly solution to ensure the survival of their hunters. Somewhere around this time, a devastating event occurred that permanently fractured the original workshop. The scholars of Bergenworth received disturbing reports from a remote, rain-lashed coastal settlement known as the Fishing Hamlet. The desperate local villagers had discovered the rotting carcasses of a massive great one named Kos washed up on their beach. By consuming the glowing parasites clinging to the dead body, the entire village mutated rapidly into grotesque fish-like monstrosities that blindly worshipped the decaying carcass in the mud. Master Willem tasked Gehrman and Maria to escort a specialized team of scholars to secure the hostile area. The hunters utilized extreme physical force to carve a path directly through the village. Reaching through the center of the ruined hamlet, the hunters stood by as the visiting scholars immediately commenced unspeakable experiments upon the surviving villagers. They then defiled the corpse of the Great One directly on the beach, violently extracting a living unborn orphan from the entity's womb to harvest its umbilical cord. Witnessing these profound atrocities firsthand completely broke Maria's spirit. She was flooded with an unbearable amount of guilt upon realizing that her sacred vow to protect the innocent had been shadowed by participation in the cruelest of massacres possible. Unable to tolerate this any longer, the devastated noblewoman walked entirely alone to a deep, dark stone well in the center of the fishing hamlet. She permanently casted her weapons, the Rakyo, inside the fishing hamlet's well. She then returned to the highest, most restricted tiers of the Grand Cathedral known as the Research Hall, residing herself permanently among the patients who had been subjected to the Healing Church's own terrible experiments, dedicating the remainder of her life to acting as a gentle nurse to these patients. Maria sought desperately to atone for her terrible sins until she succumbed to her death. Devastated by the sudden absence of his student, the first hunter returned to the workshop entirely isolated and depressed. He spent his silent days meticulously carving a life-sized wooden replica of Maria to erase his unbearable trauma. Matching her exact physical height and delicate facial features, he constructed complex articulated joints and dressed the pale wooden figure in a fine dress. But this soulless replica completely lacked the spirit and voice of the woman he loved. This caused his desperate attachment to sour into deep resentment, and he ultimately abandoned the doll in the corner to gather dust. But the massacre at the fishing hamlet did not go unnoticed. The suffering of the hamlet became tied to something far worse: the hunter's nightmare. Kos was dead, but the Great Ones are not bound by death in the same way humans are. Her presence remained connected to the nightmare, and the fishing hamlet's curse continued long after the massacre. The curse was tied to the sins of Bergenworth and the hunters who carried out their orders. The hunters had slaughtered an entire village, desecrated the body of Kos, and taken her unborn child in their search for knowledge. Now, the hunters themselves were trapped in a nightmare born from that violence. This became the hunter's nightmare, a twisted version of Yharnam filled with blood, corpses, and endless fighting. Hunters who had fallen completely into bloodlust were condemned to this place after death. Here, they were forced to continue doing what they had done in life: hunting. They wandered through the nightmare, killing beasts and other hunters over and over and over again, unable to escape the violence that had consumed them. With old Yharnam in ashes and the original hunters scattered by grief and curses, the beastly scourge threatened to consume the entire city. Lawrence, the ambitious founder of the Healing Church, realized that the quiet mortal methods of the hidden workshop were no longer sufficient. He sought a permanent solution to sustain his hunters against all of these impossible odds. Armed with a third umbilical cord, which was extracted from the unborn orphan at the fishing hamlet, Lawrence initiated a ritual to contact the cosmos. The signal resonated across transcendental planes, successfully beckoning a massive Great One known as the Moon Presence. A desperate pact was forged. The Moon Presence established a pocket dimension separated from the physical world, which is an isolated and perfectly safe sanctuary known as the Hunter's Dream, But this realm required a living human consciousness to serve as its anchor. Gehrman, shattered by the loss of Maria and carrying the immense guilt of the Hamlet's massacre, surrendered his mind to the cosmic entity. His physical body was left to slowly wither in the waking world, while his consciousness was pulled permanently into the dream. This sanctuary perfectly mirrored Gehrman's old physical workshop, complete with a towering ancient tree, steep cliffs, and a massive field of white blooming flowers bathed in the light of the pale moon. The moon presence also explicitly animated the abandoned wooden doll Gehrman had carved. The replica was granted a soft voice and a task to tend to the hunters who would visit the realm. The hunter's dream became a refuge for hunters caught in the endless cycle of the hunt. The moon presence was connected to this strange realm, and the hunters who became bound to the dream could return to it even after being killed in Yharnam. Their bodies could die, but their connection to the dream allowed them to return and continue the hunt. Inside the dream, the doll helped the hunter go stronger by channeling their collected blood echoes, which, to summarize, is basically the level-up system in the game. Gehrman had become its caretaker, guiding the hunters who arrived here and advising them through their hunts. With Gehrman locked away in the hunter's dream and the hidden workshop abandoned, the Healing Church faced a massive crisis in the waking world. The beastly scourge had spread far beyond the point of quiet containment. The terrifying mutations could no longer be swept under the rug by a handful of assassins operating in the dark. The church needed a public, overwhelming military force to maintain control of the panicking city. A man named Ludwig stepped forward to fill the void left by Gehrman. Ludwig completely redefined the concept of the hunt. He stripped away the secrecy, the dark coats, and the quiet executions. Instead, he founded the Holy Blades, a heavily armed militaristic branch of the Healing Church that operated openly in the streets. Ludwig recruited the ordinary citizens of Yharnam. He then armed them with heavy wooden shields, pitchforks, and rifles, formally instructing the locals to purge their own neighborhoods. To arm his elite church soldiers, Ludwig abandoned the elegant skill-based Siderite weapons of the old workshop. He commissioned massive, brutal mechanical weapons like the Kirkhammer and Ludwig's Holy Blade, which are heavy chunks of iron designed to rely entirely on crushing brute force rather than agility. Ludwig himself wielded a mystical weapon discovered deep within the Chalice dungeons, the Holy Moonlight Sword. This glowing arcane greatsword became the absolute symbol of the church's righteous crusade. Under Ludwig's command, the hunters were viewed as honorable holy clerics marching through the streets as saviors. But the tragedy of the old blood is absolute. Because Ludwig and his holy blades consumed massive quantities of church blood to sustain their campaigns, their eventual downfalls were catastrophic. As the cruel irony of Yharnam dictates, the clerics who resisted the scourge with the most willpower eventually mutated into the largest, most hideous beast the city had ever seen. Ludwig himself succumbed to the plague, transforming into a towering monster. He was doomed to suffer blindly in the hunter's nightmare. After the church's experiments with blood and the failure of its hunters to completely stop the beasts, some of its scholars began looking for another way forward. They believed that humanity could evolve beyond its physical limitations by gaining contact with the Great Ones. In other words, they wanted to achieve the same kind of higher existence that Byrgenwerth had originally sought. This eventually led to two powerful groups within the Healing Church, the Choir and the School of Mensis. The Choir was one of the highest-ranking groups within the church. Its members believed that true insight came from looking beyond ordinary human perception. Their blindfolds reflected this idea. Physical eyes were not enough to understand the cosmos. Unlike most Great Ones, Abritas was actually found in a physical location beneath Yharnam. The Choir brought her to the surface and placed her deep within the upper cathedral ward, where she remained hidden from ordinary citizens. There, the Choir studied and worshipped her, hoping to use their contact with the Great One to achieve a higher form of existence. But their pursuit of evolution drove them to commit unspeakable atrocities. Operating a facility known as the Orphanage, the choir took in the vulnerable abandoned children of Yharnam. These children were not given shelter. They were used as human test subjects. The choir infected the orphans with the cosmic blood of Abritus, attempting to artificially force them into becoming kin, which are lesser cosmic beings. This horrific experimentation resulted in the creation of the celestial emissaries, the blue, bulbous alien creatures that silently wander the upper wards of the sky. The orphans were physically and mentally destroyed, sacrificed entirely to serve as the choir's fleshy antennas to the cosmos. Yet, as terrifying as the choir was, they were rivaled by an even darker faction operating in the shadows of the city. The School of Mensis was a secretive branch of the Healing Church based in Yharnam, the Unseen Village. Unlike the more public parts of the church, Mensis worked in complete secrecy. Their goal was to reach the Great Ones and gain the knowledge needed to transcend humanity. To carry out their experiments, Mensis needed human subjects. Their kidnappers, known as Snatchers, prowled the streets of Yharnam and dragged people back to Yharnam. Even members of the Healing Church were not safe from them. Deep inside Yharnam, these victims were used in the terrible rituals of Mensis. The exact nature of these rituals is never fully explained, but their results can be seen throughout the village. One of the most disturbing results was the One Reborn, who is a gigantic creature made from masses of human bodies and body parts. The creature appears to have been created as part of Mensis' attempt to reach something beyond humanity. But the One Reborn was only part of their greater plan. Mensis eventually acquired a third umbilical cord. The description of the cord tells us exactly what happened. The cord granted Mensis audience with Murgo, but resulted in the stillbirth of their brains. Murgo was the mysterious infant connected to Queen Yharnam. Although Murgo was already dead, the Great Ones exist beyond ordinary humans' ideas of life and death. Mensis somehow managed to make contact with the child even within the nightmare, but the ritual came at a terrible price. The bodies of the Mensis scholars were left behind in Yharnam, while their minds became trapped within the nightmare of Mensis. Their attempt to reach the Great Ones had effectively destroyed them. This ritual in the Unseen Village is what finally shattered the world. By reaching out to the infant Great One, Mikolash successfully drew the attention of the cosmos. His ritual was the exact catalyst that forcefully pulled the Blood Moon down over Yharnam, triggering the apocalyptic city-wide beast mutation that destroyed the remaining sane population. The city was thoroughly shattered. The streets were overrun by beasts. Choir was locked away, mutating into aliens, and the Mensis scholars had inadvertently pulled their own consciousness into a nightmare dimension, leaving their physical bodies in the hidden village. After centuries of blood ministration, forbidden experiments, and attempts to contact the Great Ones, our story finally begins. A mysterious foreigner arrives in the city. Almost nothing is known about their past. We do not know their name, where they came from, or even exactly what illness brought them to Yharnam. The only clear clue is that they came searching for something called pale blood. The meaning of pale blood is never fully explained. It could refer to a substance, a person, or something connected to the Great Ones. The game deliberately leaves its meanings ambiguous. Whatever it is, the hunter believes that Yharnam is the place where they will find it. Their search eventually leads them to Yosefka's clinic, where an elderly blood minister offers them Yharnam's famous blood ministration. The treatment is supposed to cure almost any illness, making Yharnam one of the most important destinations for desperate patients from across the world. The foreigner accepts the treatment. As the blood enters the body, they experience a strange vision. A creature made of blood crawls toward them, seemingly ready to consume them. But before it can reach them, A creature suddenly catches fire and turns to ash. The meaning of this vision is never explained. It may suggest that something about the hunter is unusual, but the game never confirms that they possess a special biological immunity to the beast plague. Instead, it establishes that the hunter's journey is connected to the forces far beyond ordinary medicine. The hunter eventually awakes inside the clinic. They are given a simple instruction: seek pale blood to transcend the hunt. But before they can discover what pale blood means, they must first survive Yharnam. The hunter leaves the clinic and encounters their first beast. With no proper weapon and no understanding of the city they have entered, they are quickly overwhelmed. Death, however, is not the end. The hunter awakens in a strange realm completely separated from Yharnam. This place is known as the Hunter's Dream, as we previously talked about. Inside, they find the doll which helps the hunter to level up, and Gammon, who tells them to go out into Yharnam and kill a few beasts. To the hunter, it initially sounds like a simple task, but Gammon knows far more about the hunt than he reveals. The hunter soon discovers that the dream is not simply a safe place to rest. It is connected to the hunt itself. Through the dream, the hunter can return to Yharnam after death and continue their journey, while the doll can use the blood echoes they collect to strengthen them. Armed with a trick weapon and a firearm, the hunter finally enters central Yharnam. The city is already deep in the hunt. Most of the ordinary citizens have locked themselves inside their homes. They refuse to open their doors, terrified of the beasts roaming the streets. Others have joined the hunters outside, forming violent mobs that patrol the city with torches, pitchforks, and crude weapons. The distinction between hunter and victim is already beginning to disappear. The people of Yharnam have become so consumed with fear that they attack anything they believe might be a beast. Some of them shout that the beasts must be burned, while others simply wander the streets looking for something to kill. The hunter fights through this chaos, eventually reaching the bridge leading toward the cathedral ward. But before they can continue, they encounter another hunter who has already lost himself to the blood. This is exactly where we meet Father Gascoigne. As we discussed earlier, Father Gascoigne was once a devoted family man and a skilled executioner for the church. But by the time the hunter finds him in the tomb of Odin, the old blood has completely destroyed his mind. He stands among the corpses of the very citizens he was supposed to protect, alongside the body of his own wife, Viola. The battle is frantic and brutal. Gascoigne fights with the desperate skill of a veteran, but as the blood takes full control, he mutates into a towering beast. The hunter is forced to strike him down. With the feral father defeated, the path finally opens into the cathedral ward. This area was once the beating heart of the healing church. Now, it is essentially a massive graveyard. The towering Gothic structures and grand plazas are practically abandoned. The streets are guarded only by pale, masked wardens and massive lumbering church giants carrying heavy weapons. The highest-ranking clerics sealed the gates long ago to hide from the plague, leaving the lower streets to rot. While exploring these quiet, dangerous courtyards, the hunter crosses paths with a familiar figure standing in the shadows. It is Eileen the Crow. As we established in the earlier chapters, she is the hunter of hunters, burdened with the miserable duty of executing her own comrades before they fully turn into monsters. She warns the foreigner to stay away from the tomb of Odin. Gascoigne's old partner, Henrik, had discovered his ruined family and gone completely mad with grief. Ignoring the warning, the hunter returns to the graveyard to help the old crow. Together, they corner the maddened veteran among the tombstones and put an end to his suffering. But before advancing to the grand cathedral, the hunter uncovers a hidden path beneath the tomb. By pulling a heavy lever and descending down the dark halls, they are led deep into a valley below the city. This descent brings them straight into the ashes of old Yharnam. While exploring the ruined district is entirely optional, Stepping into the ashes is highly recommended because of the ancient artifacts and hidden pathways it unlocks. As we covered before, this is the exact district that was ravaged by the Ashen Blood Plague and subsequently burned to the ground by the explosive powder keg hunters. The ruins are still smoldering. The surviving beasts, heavily scarred and terrified of fire, wander aimlessly through the smoke-choked alleys. High above the charred streets, a voice booms from the ruined clock tower. It is Jura, the veteran hunter who renounced his vows after realizing the sheer horror of the church's massacre. True to his word, he fires the heavy Gatling gun at the foreigner, desperately trying to protect the roaming creatures below. He shouts his tragic realization across the valley, reminding the intruder that the monsters they are hunting are still people. The hunter is forced to carefully navigate the heavy gunfire and survive the streets to uncover the secrets buried beneath the ashes of the church's greatest sin. At the very bottom of the ruined valley, waiting inside an abandoned burning church, is the blood-starved beast. This monster is the ultimate culmination of the Ashen Blood Plague. By putting the suffering creature out of its misery, the hunter uncovers the Thumeru Chalice, the ancient artifact that first allowed the Bergenworth scholars to explore the underground labyrinths. Defeating this beast also lets the hunter open the sealed doors to the Healing Church workshop, giving the hunter a secret backdoor route to reach Vicar Amelia without having to purchase the expensive Hunter Chief emblem to unlock the main cathedral gates. But the death of the blood-starved beast has another consequence. After the beast is defeated, strange figures known as Snatchers begin appearing around Yharnam. These enormous hooded men work for the school of Mensis. Their purpose is to capture people and take them to the hidden unseen village where Mensis conducts its horrific experiments. If one of them manages to kill the hunter does not awaken in the hunter's dream. Instead, they are kidnapped and taken to the Hypogean jail, a hidden prison deep beneath the Hardghoul. The hunter awakens inside a dark cell surrounded by the other prisoners. The area is filled with evidence of Mensis' experiments, making it clear that the Snatchers have been bringing victims here for some time. Escaping the prison eventually leads the hunter deeper into Yharnam, where they encounter a very dangerous beast called Dark Beast Paul. This enormous skeletal beast is covered in blue lightning and guards the path to the lower section of the unseen village. Defeating it opens the way toward a set of large iron doors that lead back into the abandoned streets of Old Yharnam. This hidden shortcut offers a completely different way to deal with Jura. If the hunter enters Old Yharnam from this back door and approaches the clock tower quietly without attacking any of the surviving beasts in the streets, he will greet the foreigner peacefully. If the hunter simply answers his question by agreeing to spare the beasts, Jura will gladly hand over his powder keg badge and a gesture of respect. Surviving these horrors, the hunter returns to the cathedral ward and ascends the massive stone steps leading up to the grand cathedral itself. Inside the halls, the hunter finds Vicar Amelia. She's the last remaining high cleric of the Healing Church. She kneels entirely alone before the grand altar, clutching a golden pendant in her hands and whispering a desperate prayer of salvation. But her blind faith cannot save her from the curse running through her veins. Right before the hunter's eyes, her physical form shatters. Her bones stretch and snap, transforming the holy woman into a massive, shrieking, white-furred beast. This horrific transformation proves the Absolute's cruelest rule of Yharnam. Those who fight the Scourge with the strongest willpower always mutate into the most terrifying monsters. After an exhausting battle, the hunter strikes down the Vicar and approaches the grand altar. Resting quietly on the cold stone is a beastly skull. It belongs to Lawrence, the first Vicar and the ambitious founder of the Healing Church. When the hunter touches the skull, they trigger a lingering memory trapped within the bone. A vision plays out, showing the exact moment Lawrence abandoned his mentor, Master Willem, at the Bergenworth College. Through this vision, The hunter learns the sacred password required to unlock a heavy wooden door hidden in the city. The password is a dire warning that was ignored long ago. Fear the old blood. Speaking these words opens the gate to the Forbidden Woods, pushing the hunter out of the city and directly towards Byrgenwerth. This dark forest acts as a natural barrier, deliberately isolating the old college from the madness of Yharnam. But the woods are far from safe. The infection here has mutated in a completely different way. Instead of the traditional beastly scourge, the local villages and wildlife have been consumed by parasitic snakes that burst violently from their bodies. Fighting through the forest, the hunter finally reaches Byrgenwerth College. As we discussed earlier, this was once the greatest institution of learning in the world. Now, it is a complete shadow of its former glory. The brilliant scholars are long gone. In their place, horrific, mutated insect creatures known as the Gardens of Eyes wander aimlessly through the dusty libraries. At the top floor of the college observatory, the hunter finds Master Willem. The old provost is severely aged and practically catatonic, sitting motionless in his rocking chair. He does not speak a single word to the foreigner. He simply raises his wooden staff and points it towards the reflection of the pale moon on the lake below. Following the old master's direction, the hunter steps off the balcony and plunges into Moonside Lake. Upon landing on the lake, the hunter sees a huge spider-like creature called Rom. Rom was once a scholar of the college who was granted eyes on the inside, elevating her to a lesser cosmic state. But this ascension left her physically trapped and mentally hollow. Her true purpose in the lake is to act as a metaphysical shield. Rom's presence generates a massive citywide illusion over the entire region. She acts as a barrier, holding back the dark ritual being conducted by the School of Mensis and hiding the terrifying reality of the cosmos from the fragile minds of ordinary humans. The hunter engages Rom. Fighting through the swarms of smaller spiders she summons to protect herself. When the vacuous spider is finally killed, the absolute truth of the world is laid bare. The illusion shatters instantly. The hunter is teleported back to the city, standing outside a chapel in the unseen village. They look up at the sky, and the veil is completely gone. The blood moon hangs impossibly low and red over Yharnam. The towering multi-limbed great ones known as the amygdalae, which have secretly been clinging to the cathedrals this entire time, are now completely visible to the naked eye. The piercing cry of an unseen infant echoes endlessly through the streets. The nightmare has fully breached the waking world. With the illusion destroyed, the hunter is forced to navigate the hostile streets of Yahargul, the hidden district controlled by the School of Mensis. The sky is now a suffocating, oppressive red. The secret is out, and the boundary between the physical world and the cosmos has completely collapsed. The towering amygdalae cling to the buildings, actively firing beams of arcane energy down into the streets. The village is crowded with the horrifying results of the school's blood sacrifices. Cultists roam the alleys, and grotesque creatures constructed from fused human body parts defend the courtyards. The hunter fights their way through the madness of the village, eventually reaching a massive open square. Here, the sky tears open, and a colossal, rotting abomination falls to the ground. This is the One Reborn. As we discussed earlier, this horrifying entity was built entirely from the melted corpses of the innocent citizens kidnapped by the Mensis Snatchers. After executing the grotesque mass of flesh, the hunter proceeds into the deepest, darkest chambers of the village. Inside a quiet room, they find the physical bodies of the Mensis scholars. They sit rigidly in chairs, arranged in a circle, wearing massive iron cages on their heads. They are all dead, their bodies mummified and dry. As we established before, the scholars successfully contacted the Great Ones, but the ritual came at a terrible price. Their minds were pulled directly into a nightmare dimension, leaving their physical bodies to rot behind. The hunter then ventures out into the nightmare of Mensis. This realm is a twisted place built from the scholar's fractured minds. The hunter fights through this hostile dreamscape, battling mutated beasts and madness-inducing monsters. The hunter then finally faces the leader of the school himself. Mikolash has gone completely insane. He runs wildly through the misty halls, wearing his iron cage and rambling incoherently about granting eyes and communing with the cosmos. The hunter chases the mad scholar through the labyrinth, eventually cornering him in a locked room to execute and silence his frantic ramblings for good. But the hunt is not over. Ascending to the very top of the nightmare castle, the crying of the unseen infant becomes deafening. Near the final elevator, the hunter encounters the weeping spirit of Queen Yharnam. She stands silently in a blood-soaked white dress, gazing upwards. As we covered in the beginning of the video, she is the ancient Thumerian mother grieving for her lost child Murgo. The hunter steps into a massive moonlit arena at the peak of the nightmare. Here, they encounter Murgo's wet nurse. This terrifying multi-armed cosmic entity acts as a fierce guardian for the formless infant child. The hunter engages the cosmic being in a brutal, exhausting fight, dodging its heavy, sweeping blade and fighting through a thick, blinding fog. When the wet nurse finally collapses and fades away, the crying of the infant lingers for a few moments before slowly fading into absolute silence. The words "Nightmare Slain" appear across the screen. The ritual of Mensis is officially broken. The source of the blood moon has been silenced, and the immediate threat to Yharnam is neutralized. With the assigned task complete, the hunter finds a lantern and prepares to return to the hunter's dream to face Gehrman one last time. But before they can accept Gehrman's final mercy and wake up from the dream, there is one last terrible secret that must be uncovered. The events of the DLC still have not been uncovered. To enter the DLC, the hunter needs to possess an item known as the Eye of a Blood-Drunk Hunter. After that, a massive amygdala just outside Odin Chapel reaches down and crushes the hunter in its grip. Instead of dying, the hunter is transported into a hellish purgatorial dimension reserved for the worst sinners of the Healing Church. The hunter has now entered the hunter's nightmare. As we discussed in earlier chapters, the physical death, of course, at the fishing hamlet did not mean the end of her influence. The Great One laid a terrible hex on the Bergenworth scholars and all the hunters who followed them. The hunter is now dragged directly into the result of that hex. The hunter's nightmare. They awaken in a twisted, decaying reflection of the cathedral ward. The sky is dark, the architecture is heavily warped, and literal rivers of blood flow through the streets. This is a purgatory for the old hunters who succumbed to their bloodlust. They wander the ruins aimlessly, completely mindless, doomed to hunt beasts and each other for eternity. Following the river of blood into a dark corpse-filled cavern, the hunter comes face to face with Ludwig. As we established before, Ludwig was the heroic leader of the church's holy blades, but the endless consumption of blood warped him into a horse-like monster. He is blind, terrified, and violently lashes out at anything that moves. The fight is chaotic and brutal, but halfway through the battle, Ludwig is knocked to the ground and notices something glowing in the dark. It is his old weapon, the holy moonlight sword. Upon seeing the glowing blade, the maddened beast briefly regains a shred of his human sanity. He stands upright, holding the sword proudly by his side, and fights the hunter now as an honorable, holy cleric. The hunter ultimately strikes him down, granting the old leader the honorable death he was denied in the waking world. Moving past Ludwig's corpse, the hunter ascends into a towering medical facility known as the Research Hall. As we covered earlier, This is the exact place where the Healing Church conducted their horrific experiments on innocent patients, desperately trying to force human minds to connect with the cosmos. The halls are filled with the tragic swollen-headed victims of these experiments. At the very top of the facility, inside the massive astral clock tower, the hunter finds Lady Maria sitting motionless in a chair. As we remember, Maria was Gehrman's greatest student. She was completely broken by the atrocities committed at the fishing hamlet. Her true purpose here in the nightmare is to act as a permanent guard, preventing anyone from discovering the dark secret buried behind the clock. To keep that secret hidden, Maria rises from her chair to fight the foreigner. Refusing to let the intruder pass, she draws her blades and uses her own corrupted blood and eventually raw fire to enhance her swift, deadly strikes. In a deeply tragic and beautiful duel, the hunter defeats the noble woman, finally freeing her from her endless guilt. With Maria defeated, the hunter steps forward and holds up a celestial dial. The giant face of the clock tower groans and swings open, revealing a dark, rain-lashed coastal village. The hunter steps out into the fishing hamlet. The rain is still pouring, and the villagers are still mutated fish monsters. The hunter carves a path through the flooded wooden shacks, eventually walking down to the beach where the scholars defiled the Great Ones so many years ago. Crawling out from the rotting carcass of the dead mother is the orphan, of course. This creature is the physical manifestation of the Great One's lingering rage and sorrow. Born fighting, it wields a massive, fleshy weapon, which is actually its placenta, and attacks the hunter with relentless fury. The hunter engages the orphan on the shoreline. It is arguably the most demanding and exhausting battle of the entire journey. After a grueling fight, the creature finally falls to the sand and dies. However, a dark, shadowy spirit lingers over the massive corpse, of course. The hunter steps forward and strikes the shadow with their weapon, completely destroying it. The words, "Nightmare Slain," appear across the screen for the final time. The curse, of course, is officially broken. A quiet peace settles over the rain-lashed beach, and the trapped souls of the old hunters can finally rest. With the sins of the past fully resolved, the hunter awakens back in the hunter's dream. The massive ancient tree is currently engulfed in flames, signaling that the long night in Yharnam has finally come to an end. When the hunter finally returns from their long journey, they find the hunter's dream completely engulfed in flames. The workshop is burning, and the doll directs the foreigner toward the flower field, where Gehrman awaits him. As we established earlier, Gehrman has been trapped in this realm for decades. He has acted as the tragic overseer of the moon presence, guiding generations of hunters. Now that the source of the plague has been silenced and the nightmare is over, his final duty is to set the foreigner free. He offers the hunter his absolute mercy. He asks them to submit their life, allowing him to sever their connection to the dream so they can wake up safely under the morning sun in the real world. This is exactly where the story fractures into 3 distinct endings, depending entirely on the hunter's choice. If the hunter accepts the offer, we experience the first ending. Gehrman stands up from his wheelchair and executes the kneeling hunter with his heavy scythe. The foreigner suddenly wakes up on the real streets of Yharnam. The long night has finally passed, and the sun is rising over the crumbling city. The hunt is officially over for them, and they are free to walk away. But this peaceful resolution comes at a heavy cost, as they leave Gehrman behind to suffer completely alone in the burning dream. If the hunter refuses to submit, the second ending unfolds. Determined to save the foreigner from the nightmare, Gehrman stands up and draws the burial blade. He fights the hunter with extreme speed and agility, desperately trying to grant them mercy by force. The battle is beautiful, The music swells as the first hunter and the last hunter duel to the absolute death, and the hunter finally strikes Gehrman down. The old man whispers his gratitude. He is finally freed from his eternal prison. But this victory is a terrible trap. The sky turns a deep blood red, and the moon presence descends from the cosmos. Because the ancient pact made by Lawrence still requires a human anchor, the entity embraces the hunter. The screen fades to black. When the hunter awakens, they are bound to the old wheelchair, becoming the brand new caretaker of the dream. A tragic cycle simply resets itself for the next generation. But there is a third hidden path that reveals the true ending of the story. Throughout their journey, the hunter has the opportunity to discover and consume 3 separate third umbilical cords. As we covered in the earlier chapters, these cords belong to infant great ones, such as the formless Murgo and the orphan, of course. Master Willem always believed that humanity needed to line their brains with ice to ascend. By physically consuming these cosmic remnants, the hunter literally internalizes the eldritch truth, elevating their own existence. In this final ending, the hunter refuses Gehrman and defeats him in the flower field, and the moon presence descends from the sky and attempts to embrace its new prisoner. It completely fails. The immense cosmic power of the consumed umbilical cord surges through the hunter, allowing them to reject the moon presence's control. Shocked and enraged by this resistance, the moon presence attacks. The hunter engages the final battle. The hunter slaughters the cosmic entity. With the main source of the dream dead, the old pact is permanently destroyed. In the closing moments of the game, the hunter undergoes a complete physical and mental evolution. Having absorbed the blood, the echoes, and the umbilical cords, they transcend their mortal body entirely. They transform into a small infant great one. The doll kneels down and gently picks up the glowing slug-like creature, holding it like a child. Humanity has finally achieved the impossible dream of Byrgenwerth. They have successfully evolved into the next stage of life, bringing an absolute true end to the horrific tragedy of Yharnam, and sparking a brand new dawn for mankind. For me, Bloodborne has the best lore in any From Software game I've ever played. But in another universe of knights and magic, the tale of a chosen undead ringing the bells of awakening and linking the first flame is told. The story of Dark Souls is my favorite story ever told by From Software, and to truly understand it, step with me into the past and discover how Gwyn rose to power, how the Age of Fire began, and the journey of the chosen undead through the dying land of Lordran.